Welcome to Ideas, a time of conversation about all things board games. Community is built on conversations, and games are built on ideas.
Hey, my name is Brent here on Cloudy the Chance of Meeples, and welcome to another edition of Ideas, a time where we talk about ideas in board gaming and how they come from here to the games that we play. And of course, community is built on idea or built on conversation, much like games are built on ideas. And this month, very special because we're moving away from design work in board gaming and moving to the illustration and the artwork. And today we have a very special guest and also fellow Canadian, Chris Quilliams. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
And if the name Chris Quilliams doesn't ring a bell, I can almost guarantee you've probably played a game in which Chris has had his hands in doing the artwork. Name a few games, Chris, that you have worked on, let's say in the last 10 years.
Okay, so I guess the biggest one would be Azul, plus all the expansions. Pandemic. Another one of the biggest ones is Pandemic Legacy, Season 1 and 2. Great Western Trail, the new one, Carcassonne. So the second edition for Carcassonne, I did all the covers. So there's an older one which I really like. It's not as famous, called Clash of Cultures. It was kind of my as well as Merchants and Marauders. That was kind of my gateway into the industry. So that goes way back though. But so yeah, I've worked on, and Board Game Geek gives me credit for over 125 games. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask what your first one was. Was Merchants and Marauders your first one?
No, that was my first one I worked on with Zev when he owned Z-Man Games. And it was called, the first official board game was called Roadkill Rally, although I worked on jobs with him before that with his card games. So, yeah, that was my first one. And I was still doing traditional art at the time. So I was kind of in between digital and traditional. So it's a cover I kind of hand painted, but then scanned in and then finished it with traditional medium. So it's kind of, I find it's an odd cover. And I mean, it's a game nobody knows about now. So I'm kind of happy about that because I think the cover is awful. So, and it's all first covers, so.
Well, I'm going to talk a little bit more about like the artwork moving forward, but let's go back before you were an illustrator. Like growing up, like have board games always been part of your life? Like what got you into this hobby?
No. Well, one of the things, I had a friend, his name was Colin, and he would introduce me to a few games, and that included Pandemic, actually, because the Pandemic existed 5 years prior to when I worked on it.
Okay.
So, and then I played a few other games. There was a game called Robot Ricochet, which I really liked. There was a game called Circus Imperium that I really liked. It was a racing game based on chariots, but the horses, instead of horses, they were creatures.
Okay.
So I really, really enjoyed the mechanics for that game, and it was just a lot of fun. So and then even further back, there was a game at the time, Games Workshop, I think, owned it. It was called Talisman.
Okay.
And
yeah.
I had the second edition to that. So that still is my favorite edition I played. And in terms of board games, it's kind of more standard where you're going around a track with spaces. That's what most people think of when they think of board games in terms of the layout. So Euro games weren't around yet. So it was just more of the commonplace in board games, I guess. So, but that was ages ago. So
so putting that together, you didn't grow up playing games, like you got into the hobby as an adult.
I did, but I played role-playing games. So
okay.
And then I actually belonged to a role-playing group that met downtown Winnipeg.
Okay.
And they were called the Arcadian Guild. They no longer exist anymore, I don't think. I could be wrong about that. But we mostly played games like Shadow Fist, and no Shadow. Pardon me, Shadow Run.
Hmm.
We played GURPS Fantasy a lot, and and then we played some D&D. I think it was second edition at the time. So yeah, it was, and then some variation in other systems as well. But they would also like bring board games as well. So that was really my introduction.
Hmm.
Um, but we played, various different. There was another board game called Blood Bowl that I really liked. So
Okay. I've heard
again,
of. I've heard
yeah,
of. To be honest, I'm not a big RPG guy. I don't.
yeah, yeah. Well,
I need structure.
I've really converted to board games. I don't play RPGs anymore because
Okay.
my world is so board game dominant now that
Yeah.
I just actually really just enjoy them more now. And there's so many variations and games that like you could never run out. Like
Hmm.
there's just, well, it depends on your collection, of course. But I'm in an office where they have like thousands of games, so it's, or at least hundreds of games. So it's
Yeah.
not like we ever run out of things to play. So
So what does that look like for you at work? Do you have like sessions where people are like, let's pull this one off and just play?
yeah, like, yeah, well, we mostly do that on our game nights. So like, you know, before COVID, we would do like game nights, and then that stopped, and now we're starting them again.
Hmm.
And then we play smaller games at lunch that take less time.
Right.
Teachers is a huge one. It's kind of the dominant one, but we also do others, Sushi Go as well, and the smaller kind of more party games, I guess, because we only have an hour, and so we have to kind of economize a little bit.
Yeah.
We can't break out Scythe or something like that, so it's not as so.
Do you
But
have a favorite game
yeah,
now?
well, my favorite game of all time is, like I mentioned, it's Tichu. I know it's just a card game, but for me, it's very addictive. It's special. Like one of the requirements for me in a game is I like loud games, and I like games that are really high tension, and that has both. So you need four players. There are other versions with other amounts of players, but for me, that's like the perfect Tichu game is with four players. So where it's two teams. So
It's trick taking, right?
if not really. Like there's a stacking element to it, but like another game I really like called Black Spy by Alan Moon.
Okay.
That's probably my favorite trick taking game of all time. That's kind of based on Queens.
Okay.
No, is it Queens or Hearts? No. Anyway, yeah, I think it's called Hearts. But anyway, that has the trick taking element to it that I really like. So, but it's a much quieter game. So
Okay.
when I was with Z-Man Games, they did a whole line of card games.
Hmm.
So I got introduced to a lot of really cool games. Arboretum was another one, which has been redone since. Oh, and Parade is really good. I really like Parade as well. So like I'm really drawn to card games, I guess, because I just like the tension they create, and I like the gameplay.
Hmm.
So I mean, Euros are great too, of course, but
Hmm.
I don't know. It's just something I like about kind of more light to medium games. So it's just I find there's a fun element to them. So
Yeah, I'm like 30 to 60 minutes. Like that's my sweet spot.
yeah.
Just I don't know. I just don't have an attention span for
Yeah,
longer
like I'm a
games.
bigger fan, like in game nights, I'm a bigger fan of getting together and like playing 4 to 6 games in an evening or more than that if possible.
Hmm.
And I can sit down and just sit down all day and all evening and play like without an issue, because as long as there's a variation there.
Yeah.
So I just don't get tired of playing. It's I guess an addiction. So
I think we all have. I think we're all at that point. So let's get back into the illustration. Like, what got you into illustration? Was art a big thing for you growing up, and it just
yeah, absolutely.
progressed?
Yeah, like I really like storytelling, so I always like comics.
Hmm.
And but one thing they don't tell you about comics is the hours you've got to put in. So it's just incredible because you're drawing so much per day for the deadline.
Yeah.
And so like I started off, like it takes a while to break in, first of all, because when you're at a university, you're not a professional yet per se, like unless you're really talented. I wasn't that person.
Hmm.
So it took me about, after I was graduated from high school, took at 18, took me about 10 years. So
Wow.
so I really didn't start getting my first jobs till I was 28. So
Hmm.
um but then and then around age 30, I started doing comic book work full time. So mostly for Games Workshop in the UK. They have a comic line through
Hmm.
their Black Library line. So that was a lot of fun, but again, it's just really intense work because it's so labor intensive, and you're putting in such long hours every day. So
So how did you get that gig then with Z-Man? And then,
it kind of found me because I was working in role playing games,
mhm,
a company called Mongoose Publishing, and I had done a bunch of Conan covers, so for their Conan line. And Zev again at Z-Man, he I guess they published a game with Conan, a card game, and he I guess bought the rights to use the images.
hmm,
So he liked the images, and then he contacted me basically and said, "Do you want to do work in the board game industry?" And I started off doing work for his card game. I think it was called Shadow Fist, from what I
okay.
recall. So yeah. And then I started doing cover art for board games, and then eventually I started doing boards and stuff like that. So um but the second game I did was called Merchants and Marauders, and that won best art and I guess best art and design on Board Game Geek. So
Wow. Hmm.
so that kind of got, like, when you win an award like that, even though it's audience driven, the guy audience votes on that award, like it gets a lot of recognition. So all of a sudden, like you become a much higher profile artist because of that.
Hmm.
So I started having, a lot of companies contact me, so. And then that's when that was the same time when Sophie, my boss at Plan B, she used to own a company called Philosophia, and she bought Z-Man Games.
Okay.
And I didn't know this at the time, and I started doing more work for Zev, and then it was right around the time of that transition of sale. And so and she really liked the cover I did for Merchants and Marauders.
Hmm.
So basically that's was kind of my gateway into the industry. All these kind of events happened, and it was kind of one thing after another, and then I ended up with a full-time job, as an illustrator. It just seemed like I was destined to be in the board game industry because I didn't look for it. It just kind of found me, so
That's great. So do you
yeah.
have like a favorite illustration of all the games you've done, whether it may be one like you're just, well, you're proud of all of them, but like one that maybe came out of um just like lack of creativity, and then just something was sparked, and then it came out
Oh,
like
gosh.
exceptionally more than you thought
Mhm.
it would be. Like, do you have one that's your favorite?
Yeah, for sure. Like I think one of the most beautiful games I did was Quambra. And what's
Mm,
unique about that game, my style is so different than the style I did for the game.
mhm,
And like without working in the office for Plan B Games, I probably would have never come up with the look of that game. But because like that's where art direction is really important, and being able to do a diverse set of styles. So so I was able to adapt to what they wanted, and I just feel I created just a really beautiful game, and I was given a nice amount of time to work on it and develop style and everything and the characters, and I'm just really proud of that game. So, and
hmm.
it's something I never would have fathomed creating as an illustrator and board game designer. So, um,
How
yeah,
long did you have to work on that? Like on a typical game, how long do you have? What's your deadline like?
I can't quite remember, but I think on that game it was about 3 months, which for me, right now, that's a long time. So considering I don't have that much time anymore. So
Yeah.
um so anyway, it took a while to develop the right look for that game, because I like when you like with me, I was a staff artist, and the difference between a staff artist and hiring a freelance artist, with
Hmm.
freelance artists, you generally hire them because you like the way they draw, or you like that style, you want that style integrated into the game.
Hmm.
But with me, it's different because I do have a set of styles,
Hmm.
but they'll want something more specific to something that has a different look than what I do. So they have to either show me, or I have to find that the right look for the game. So that process can take a little while.
Hmm.
Quambra took 2 weeks, so
Wow.
which is a long time, just trying to find a style, so
So
again, I would never have that much time now, but but I look back on that, and it was just a really nice experience being able to just kind of discover what the game will look like,
right.
eventually.
So do you you say freelance is different than like a paid art or a paid artist on staff?
Yeah, if you're a staff artist, it's an entirely different experience, that's for sure.
So when you let's dive into Coimbra a little bit. So did you knew the game? Had you played the game? You knew the
Yeah,
theme, you knew everything about it, so you kind of like work around that.
that's right. Yeah, and we want, like, at the time the Euro had a very distinct look to it, and we were just trying to, like, my boss Sophie, she always wants to go outside the box, so we were just trying to do something different
Mm-hmm.
than typically is done. And so I thought a really colorful direction would be nice, and try to make it as beautiful as I can. And and it did, like, I don't I'm sure you've heard of the game.
Yeah, Coimbra, yeah.
Yeah. So like at the time, it got a lot of attention because it had a different look to it than a
Mm-hmm.
Euro generally does. So, and I was really happy with that. So because that was the intention. So I just think, like, I've really gotten into the designing board games, like, and it's ever since Quambra. So in Quambra, I kind of discovered how rewarding designing a board is, and how
Mm-hmm.
much fun it is, and how you can make it both beautiful and have it work with the game mechanics and the
Mm-hmm.
gameplay. So, and I really enjoy trying to balance those two elements and making both work together. And then also feeling like you're immersed in an entire world. So if you look at the table layout of Quambra, all the cards, the pieces, the board, everything kind of works together. And which, typically it does for any game, but with Crumbra, there's just this I think it's a special feel to it when it's all laid out on the table, and it's very distinct and unique because it's so stylistic in its approach. So,
Mm-hmm.
and lots of people do this, like, I'm a big fan of Ian O'Toole. He's really good at that,
Mm-hmm.
um again, like, games are really, really getting beautiful now, but at that time, the Euro, it was a very different thing,
Mm-hmm.
so.
What games stand out to you, like even the last like year and a half, 2 years of like, man, the artwork in this game is it's exceptional. Like what's some of your favorite artwork in the hobby right now?
Well, like you're mentioning Scythe. Scythe is the art in that is just like Jacob's art in that is astonishing.
Mm-hmm.
Andrew Bosley, Everdale, he's super hot right now. His art is incredible. Tool is another one.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Mr. Cunnington, I think, like, they're just, like, every game they work on, it just gets better,
Mm-hmm.
like, it's amazing how they're improving. So, like, and to me as an artist, it's inspiring and makes me want to do better work. And it's like the standard keeps going up as far as I'm concerned. So you have to keep kind of pushing yourself so you can keep up, so.
Mm-hmm. So where do you get like inspiration? Like, let's say you did Equinox, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
So you had the game, or that was what was that like originally, like Colossal Arena or something like that?
Yes, that's correct. And it had a kind of monsters fighting an arena, kind of Roman gladiator type of
Mm-hmm.
approach.
So
But I mean, it comes down to the art director, which is Sophie Gravel,
mm-hmm.
and she just didn't want to do that. She wanted to do something different. So, and her approach was more creatures fighting in a forest, which I was really drawn to because I'm a big fan of that type of thing. I love fantasy, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't often get to do that. So I wanted to make the creatures really cool but familiar, so.
So like what
And I'm a big fan of Rainer Kincia's games. I think he's incredible game designer, and Equinox is no exception. It's just really well conceived games. So.
so where did you get like the ideas of these creatures? Just like do you just start doodling
Oh
and
yeah, I
then
just
just see
start
what
doodling,
happens?
and they just kind of come to life exactly. So,
Hmm.
and actually, Equinox went through three stages because
Hmm.
I actually started off by doing the more gladiatorial approach,
Okay.
and Sophie kind of didn't like that, so she wanted to do something kind of removed from that and something maybe a little more magical and special, so and then so I went in that new direction, and then just like when I'm sketching and like things just come to life, you think about it and you get like an image in your head and you sketch it down that may come out differently than you're thinking about it, so it
Hmm.
just kind of evolves.
Right. Do you do
um,
everything on digital now, or do you
Yeah, I
do
do
kind of
everything
both?
digital except when I sketch my main ideas,
Hmm.
I do it on paper. So, because for me, it's my thinking process. I think for me, it works better when I have a pencil on paper. So, but everything else I do is digital just for time constraint. I was trained as a traditional painter. I really like doing traditional painting,
Hmm.
but it's just very time consuming to do it commercially. So, it just doesn't work commercially. I know for years it was done commercially, but with the amount of games I work on now, it's would be impossible. So,
How many games are you working on
oh,
at any given time?
well, usually one at a time, but
Okay.
because of the way, like we have three design teams with a game developer and a graphic designer, so I have to feed them each team. So I could be working on three games at once. It's very possible, and that does happen. So, um, and yeah, like it's it sounds intense, and it is. So
I bet
it's a lot of work. So
it must be draining, kind of like what I was asking, like something that just like clicked because when you're
mhm.
doodling and you're like, they, art direction says, no, I want something like this, and you're like, oh man, I can't come up with this. Like we're
Yeah, well,
like,
I've struggled before for sure. There's no, but that's why like we have one of the guys at work, Martin. He is incredible. Like he's just this creative genius, and like he
mhm.
always gets me out of these situations. So when I can't think of something myself, and another game developer, Pierre Olivier, he's also just incredibly creative.
Mhm.
So these guys like sometimes I don't even have to think of a cover idea because they've already thought of it, and it's just a really cool idea, and I do it. And what I like to do is take that idea and make it better if I can. And
Mm.
so it's cool because they see the evolution of their idea and they get really excited. So
Mhm.
it's that's why working in an office with a team is amazing, because you get that collaborative nature.
Right.
And I really don't like, I know the standard is working freelance in the industry, but I feel really, really lucky because I get to work with people, and my
Mhm.
social skills have gone up, and and I actually, like, because when I work by myself, I worked by myself for 12 years, like in
Mm.
isolation basically.
Yeah.
And that, like, it does things to you. So because I, in an office, and there's kind of added pressure
Mhm.
because, if I don't want to work overtime, I have to do everything in 7 hours per day, right?
Yeah.
So that's where the pressure is, but the reward is like this incredible, like, creative team that when you collaborate and kind of like everything happens and you see the whole process, which you wouldn't see at home. And it's just, to me, it's like the ultimate in fun,
Right.
like I never get sick of going to work. It's just like, because I just look forward to it. And that's because of the people, the people I work with are awesome. So
I think that's one of the reasons why so many people just are attracted to the gaming hobby and keep
mhm.
coming back to it because it's that whole sense of community and interaction and getting together with people and laughing with people and having those moments. I'm sure we can both think of moments in gaming where we're like, remember that one time in that game when fill in the blank, right? And
Yeah,
that just
exactly.
it just brings us back together. Before I let you go,
Well,
go ahead.
I'll just make one comment about that. So when I look, I have a history now of all the games I've worked on with the
Hmm.
company. So when I look at a game, I think of that history. So I think of that moment in time
Hmm.
when I work with this group of people, and kind of I link it to that part of my life. So when I look at like a board game, I kind of think about that, and I think it's just a really cool thing. So,
Hmm.
and it's not something I ever thought about, but it happens. So I get nostalgic just thinking,
Yeah.
just looking at a game like Pandemic, for instance, and all the problems and the cool things that happened with that game,
Hmm.
and it was a different time. It was 10 years ago, so it was
Right.
like a different time in my life, so
Hmm. That's
so but that's like board games can be special that way,
yeah,
so
totally agree. So when do you know, besides the deadline, I'm back to drawing, besides your 3 month deadline of your artist or your files have to be done by this time, how do you
yeah.
know when a box cover is done? When you sit there and you're like, it's done, or
Yeah,
do you
yeah,
like keep
it's
going
just
back? You're like, maybe I can tweak this a little bit. Like,
yeah. Well, first of all, it's the deadline dictates when it's done usually,
I guess
but
so.
sometimes I'm like, well, I could have done this to it, But there are moments where I'm going, yes, this cover is done. I wouldn't do anything to it, and you just know, like, because I have this kind of list of like the process,
Hmm.
and so there's each stage of the process, and basically it's done when I finish the last stage of the
Okay.
process.
Okay.
So and then maybe it goes through some edits, and then usually it's through Martin, and he makes it better. So through he has such a great visual eye, and he
Hmm.
usually sees things I don't see, and then it kind of brings it to that next level, and it's like, oh, okay, now it's done.
Hmm.
So it all really depends, I guess. So
Okay. Yeah. So moving, looking at 2023, what are you wrapping up? What can you talk about? Can you talk about anything that is coming out? I know Plan B is putting out My Village you worked on.
yes, that is coming out this year. Yeah, that's right.
So that's the big
So,
thing.
yeah.
Um, and so anything else that you can talk about, or maybe
Well, everyone knows that New Zealand, the Great West
right.
Trail of New Zealand, is coming out this year. So, and that's going to be just wrap. We're just wrapping that up. So,
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure I'm allowed to say because again, everyone knows what's coming out. So,
Yeah.
some of the other games, I don't know if they've been announced yet or not. So,
Okay. Well, then
probably
I
there's going to be a lot of them though. So.
there will be.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, there's the schedule is quite hefty this year. So
Good
yeah. So
stuff.
and last year too, like a lot of games I've completed that aren't announced yet, they're in kind of coming out as well. So yeah,
Hmm.
we're having a wide variety of games. That's for because we
Nice.
have we have 4 lines, and
Yep.
then so it's we have to fill each brand. So
Yep.
yeah,
Good
and
stuff.
yeah,
Perfect. Well, thanks so much for taking the
no,
time. And
no
like
problem.
your artwork is fantastic. Of course, Sentry, and I got Era, and I got the playmat, and I just love I love the playmat. It just brings Era all
Yeah,
all
yeah.
together. And
Yeah, that's another cover I really like
yeah.
too. So it just has a nice painterly feel,
Hmm.
and it actually, if you put the expansion, the big box expansion beside the original cover, it forms one painting. So
Hmm.
not many people know that, but
I regret
yeah. So
I regret recycling my Rivers and Roads expansion because because I put everything into the one box.
oh,
Everything's in
okay,
bags.
okay.
So then, well, like these cubes here are like
You only have so much space.
I
So.
only have so much space, so it's you got to take yeah, you got to compile things at times. But your work is amazing, and the
Yeah,
list is just ongoing, and I'm excited to see what you have coming down the line, and just your artistic creativity. And it's been
yeah,
cool talking about the art direction, maybe not art direction, but like the illustration and how that came to be, or how that comes to be in board gaming, because I often talk about design work and hitting roadblocks and stuff, but it's kind of hearing another side of it. So I just want to
oh,
thank
cool.
you for taking the time.
Hey, no
And
problem.
this has
It was a
been
giant
fun.
pleasure. So Yeah.
So, of course, Plan B Games, that's where Chris's a lot of his work is found. So you can check out Plan B and Eggerspiel, Next Move, and Pretzel Games. And if you want to know more about Cloudy the Chance of Meeples, we're on Facebook, Cloudy the Chance of Meeples. Remember, community built on conversation, just like games are built on ideas. Till next time, grab your umbrella. The forecast is cloudy with the Chance of Meeples.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and remember to grab your umbrella because the forecast is cloudy with a chance of meeples.